Whispers in palace corridors, closed-door meetings, and blacked-out car arrivals. Something was clearly unfolding at Windsor. But no one expected this. In a move no royal watcher predicted, Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, and Prince Edward quietly moved into the heart of the monarchy. The reason? Catherine's worsening condition. But this wasn't just about support, it was the beginning of something far bigger. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Windsor had always carried the scent of tradition, power, and secrecy. Yet this latest move from Edward and Sophie shattered the illusion of royal stillness. It wasn't just a relocation, it was a signal. One that caught even senior aides by surprise. No official statement was issued, no press briefings were scheduled, and yet, within hours, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh were reportedly unpacked within the private quarters of Windsor Castle. It was quiet, intentional, and deeply unsettling to those who understood the delicate balance within the royal household. The question echoed across court watchers and insiders alike. Why now? Behind palace gates, Catherine, Princess of Wales, was facing what insiders described as a critical juncture in her recovery. Rumors of fatigue had transformed into whispers of something far more serious, complications that required her to withdraw completely from public life. William, burdened by duty and personal anguish, found himself cornered between his roles as future king and devoted husband. And into that vacuum of vulnerability stepped Sophie and Edward, not by invitation, but by necessity. Because when the monarchy wobbles, the quietest players often make the boldest moves. This wasn't merely a gesture of compassion, it was a recalibration. Edward, long overlooked in favor of his louder and more scandal-ridden siblings, had spent years flying under the radar. Sophie, widely regarded as the most trusted royal by the late Queen Elizabeth II, had nurtured a bond with Catherine that now served as the bridge between the old guard and the future crown. Their arrival at Windsor wasn't an afterthought, it was calculated. A royal intervention disguised as familial support. And their presence was felt immediately. Within days, subtle shifts began unfolding. The Wales household became more protected, their media engagements scaled back, and William was frequently seen in private consultation with his uncle. Simultaneously, insiders noted increasing tension between royal staff divided in loyalty, some favoring the stability Sophie and Edward represented, others questioning their sudden rise. Outside the palace, the Sussexes watched from a distance. There were no public comments from Harry or Meghan, but their silence spoke volumes, especially as their American ventures began releasing content eerily timed with Catherine's most vulnerable moments. A new dynamic was being formed, one where Sophie and Edward, once considered peripheral, were now being positioned closer to the center of power than ever before. Was this simply a compassionate gesture to comfort a beloved family member, or the early stages of a quiet power shift within the monarchy itself? Because in royal history, moves made in silence often carry the loudest echoes. But as the media remained fixated on Catherine's health, few realized what Sophie was orchestrating behind the scenes, and how it would reshape the monarchy's emotional core. For years, she stayed quiet, smiled for the cameras, and played the supporting role. But Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, was never just the quiet one. Behind the monarchy's gilded curtain, she had been quietly preparing, earning trust, forging private alliances, and waiting for the moment when her loyalty would be needed most. That moment had finally arrived. It was never about spotlight for Sophie. While others chased titles and headlines, she invested her energy into something far more powerful: loyalty. Not the performative kind, but the deeply rooted, behind-the-scenes kind that becomes priceless when a family is on the edge of collapse. Her devotion to Queen Elizabeth II was never up for debate. It wasn't loud, but it was unwavering. In private moments, in overlooked gestures, Sophie proved herself not only as a member of the firm, but as its emotional anchor. And now, as Catherine's health faltered, that same loyalty was being redirected with intensity toward the woman many viewed as the future queen. Catherine and Sophie shared something the public never fully saw: a bond forged not through public engagements, but through quiet solidarity. Both outsiders, both women who had earned their places, not inherited them. Sophie had been in the palace long enough to recognize real strength, and in Catherine, she saw it early on. As Catherine's condition declined, it was Sophie, not courtiers or consultants, who stepped in. Whether it was arranging discreet medical consultations or shielding the Wales children from media pressure, she acted not just as an aunt, but as a strategic protector. Inside the palace, Sophie's role shifted. No longer was she simply accompanying Edward or representing charities. She became a bridge, a rare neutral figure trusted by both Charles III and the younger royals, navigating fractured relationships with poise. She had already helped smooth post-funeral tensions between William and Harry, even managing delicate moments between Camilla and Catherine during past events. Now, with emotions running high and the monarchy's image under threat, her peacemaking instincts proved invaluable. She managed to hold the threads of civility together just long enough for the family to refocus on what mattered most: Catherine's recovery. But it was an alleged whisper from the late Queen that changed everything. "Sophie will know what to do," she had reportedly told a senior aide in her final weeks. A simple sentence, but one that carried the weight of legacy. Whether prophecy or coincidence, those words now hung in the air like a royal decree. Suddenly, staff who once overlooked her were taking cues. Her calm demeanor, her steady presence, her refusal to engage in palace drama. Sophie had become, almost overnight, Windsor's maternal force. Not just to Catherine, but to the institution itself. And yet, behind every calm surface lies a deeper current. For while Sophie offered comfort, diplomacy, and unity, the monarchy needed more than emotional support. It needed action, strategy, and quiet assertion. And that unexpectedly would come from the man beside her. Because while Sophie brought calm, Prince Edward brought something else entirely: a quiet, calculated readiness for confrontation. Overshadowed by his brothers for decades, Prince Edward was never seen as a key player until now. As others faltered under scrutiny and scandal, Edward emerged as the monarchy's last untainted son. With Catherine's recovery hanging in the balance, he took decisive steps to secure not just her comfort, but the crown's future. His rise was not explosive. It was silent, precise, and years in the making. While Charles faced relentless pressure from both tradition and time, and Andrew became entangled in controversy and disgrace, Edward simply remained. He endured the noise without being consumed by it. He chose the path of consistency over chaos, of service over scandal. That unassuming dedication, once dismissed as bland, had now become the very trait the monarchy so desperately needed. And in a kingdom weary of royal missteps, Edward's steady presence was being re-evaluated not as peripheral, but essential. Within the Privy Council, his voice, once politely tolerated, now carried weight. He was no longer the youngest brother lurking in the background. He had, through unbroken trust and quiet effectiveness, earned the respect of advisors, lords, and even some within the media. His opinions on royal transition, national unity, and Catherine's condition were taken seriously. Even the king himself began leaning more heavily on Edward, trusting his judgment where others had failed. Some insiders whispered that Charles saw in Edward not just a sibling, but a contingency. A regent in waiting. A failsafe in a crumbling chessboard of royal uncertainty. But power never moves without friction. Old rivalries were reignited behind the palace walls. Prince Andrew, despite his diminished role, bristled at Edward's ascent. For decades, their relationship had simmered with tension, Andrew's flamboyance clashing with Edward's restraint. Now, with Edward stepping deeper into royal operations and representing the crown with growing frequency, that friction turned cold. Staffers loyal to Andrew grumbled. Some aides hinted at efforts to slow Edward's growing influence. But none could deny that Edward's clean record had now become his greatest weapon in a palace starved of untainted legitimacy. Even more significant was Edward's visible commitment to Catherine and her children. He made himself available. He visited quietly, regularly, offering support not just as family, but as protector. He ensured the young heirs were shielded from the media glare. In private, he was said to have made it clear, no harm, political or emotional, would come to Catherine's family while he had breath in his body. That vow, simple yet fierce, resonated across Windsor. It was the kind of conviction that made people ask questions they'd never considered before. Was Edward being positioned for something greater? His relocation to Windsor wasn't just convenient, it was symbolic. This was the seat of royal continuity, the stronghold of the crown's past and its possible future. For Edward to live there now was to send a message, one not wrapped in PR, but steeped in legacy. He wasn't claiming power. He was guarding it. Quietly, deliberately, and without fail. But while Edward played chess with palace power structures, Catherine was fighting a battle far more personal and far more dangerous. For months, palace statements insisted everything is under control. But behind closed doors, the truth was unraveling. Catherine's condition had taken a sharp turn, and the walls of Windsor were echoing with worry. Family members were called. Aides were sworn to secrecy. But the pain could no longer be hidden. What began as whispered concerns about exhaustion slowly morphed into a crisis the palace could no longer ignore. Catherine, once the very image of regal strength, had been quietly retreating from the spotlight. Initially explained away as rest or family time, her absence soon became too frequent, too prolonged. Speculation flared, but the official line remained unwavering until it couldn't. Behind every "she's doing well" was a meeting, a phone call, a new round of doctors. The timeline was no longer linear. 1 week there was progress. The next, regression. Her inner circle watched helplessly as optimism gave way to dread. The prognosis, according to those closest, had shifted from hopeful to deeply concerning. Yet the statements continued, polished, rehearsed, detached from the storm building inside. It was this growing contradiction that began to erode public trust. Reporters grew suspicious. Even palace-friendly outlets began to question the narrative. Some insiders leaked fragments, nothing too revealing, but just enough to suggest the truth was far grimmer than admitted. And as the official lines blurred, William struggled to hold everything together. As husband, father, and future king, the weight on him became unbearable. Sources spoke of his sleepless nights, of long silences in family meetings, of a man breaking under the pressure of pretending to be composed. Their children, shielded as best as possible, began to notice the change. Tears were shed in quiet corners of the palace. And suddenly, the future itself began to feel fragile. Behind closed doors, arguments flared over medical decisions. Should they continue relying solely on palace doctors, or bring in private specialists with more advanced expertise? Not everyone agreed. Some feared outside help could spark leaks. Others believed Catherine deserved every available option. It was in this chaos that Meghan Markle's silence began to attract attention. No messages. No visits. No statements. As the woman once dubbed a royal sister-in-law remained distant, questions arose. Was this indifference or strategy? Had the rift between the brothers grown so wide that even Catherine's suffering couldn't mend it? Amid all of this, the palace initiated what many now believe was a quiet media lockdown. Select reporters were warned. Photographers were rerouted. Stories were buried under the guise of privacy. But containment could only go so far. Rumors swirled on social media. Whispers of emergency meetings, secret hospital visits, and even succession discussions. And while the monarchy remained tight-lipped, the nation began to brace for an outcome it had never imagined. This wasn't just a family crisis, it was a national one. A beloved figure was fading from view, and no amount of tradition could stop what was coming. And just as the royal family tried to contain the emotional fallout, a startling twist arrived, one that threatened to shatter the fragile peace inside the palace. A confidential meeting in a candle-lit Windsor drawing room. Two future kings, one by blood, one by role, face to face. As Catherine's condition deteriorated, William made a shocking proposition to his uncle Edward. And what they agreed to in secret could redefine the entire monarchy. No staff, no press, no formal notice, just hushed voices behind locked doors, and a conversation that would carry consequences far beyond Windsor's stone walls. William, a man on the edge, found himself trapped between duty and desperation. His wife, his anchor, was slipping through his fingers, and the royal machine showed no signs of slowing down. Foreign dignitaries still arrived. Ceremonial appearances still loomed. The press still demanded updates. But William couldn't breathe. He couldn't lead. Not when the woman he loved was fighting for her life in silence. So he turned to the only man who had never betrayed the crown. The one royal untouched by scandal, ego, or ambition. Prince Edward. The meeting was said to be brief but thunderous in its implications. William did not ask for advice. He asked for help, real tangible help, a shift of power, a contingency plan, a guardian not just for his children, but for the monarchy itself. In the event his absence became prolonged or permanent, someone had to hold the center. And in Edward, he saw not just a trusted uncle, but a man capable of navigating the storm, without losing the heart of the institution. There was no ceremony, no signatures. But what passed between them in that moment may well have been the most consequential understanding the firm has seen since Elizabeth passed. They allegedly spoke of regency, of what might happen if Charles were to step back, even briefly, and William could not rise due to personal grief or obligation. Edward would step in not to seize the crown, but to shield it. A protector, not a pretender. The kind of role that history rarely praises but always needs. And Edward, to his credit, accepted, not out of hunger for power, but out of fierce loyalty. To his brother, to the memory of his mother, and now to Catherine. From that point forward, Edward's presence at key meetings began to increase. His voice grew louder in the corridors of decision-making. William, though still visible, was less tethered to protocol. Insiders noticed a subtle delegation responsibilities shifting hands with little fanfare. And though it was never made public, the machinery of the monarchy began to bend around this quiet restructuring. Even Charles, once skeptical of Edward's leadership instincts, was said to have given his reluctant blessing, realizing the alternative might be total institutional collapse. It was a bitter pill, acknowledging that the crown might need backup. But in this storm, pride had to give way to pragmatism. This agreement sealed in sorrow, and strategy redefined the path forward. It gave William breathing room. It gave the monarchy a buffer. But most of all, it placed Edward in a position that no one saw coming. And that seismic shift did not go unnoticed. Because while this pact was forged in secrecy, not all royals welcomed Edward's growing influence, least of all Queen Camilla. Inside the palace, Queen Camilla was said to be livid. Edward and Sophie's sudden prominence disrupted everything she had spent years cultivating. She wasn't just the queen consort anymore she had fought to lead. But Catherine's crisis had reopened old wounds. And Camilla wasn't about to be sidelined without a fight. For Camilla, the path to power had been hard-won. Years of public hostility, private humiliation, and relentless comparison to the late Princess Diana had forged in her a fierce determination. She had weathered the storms, survived the whispers, and eventually stood beside Charles, not as a scandal, but as queen. And now, just when she had begun to settle into her hard-earned role, the landscape was shifting again, this time from within. The growing affection for Sophie, the nation's collective sympathy for Catherine, the sudden influence Edward appeared to wield behind palace doors. It all felt like a quiet rebellion. And Camilla, seasoned in palace warfare, recognized the signs of an internal coup dressed in civility. Old rivalries resurfaced. Camilla had never fully accepted Catherine's popularity, even if she publicly smiled beside her. Their dynamic was cordial, but cold. Catherine's effortless grace in the public eye had always stood in contrast to Camilla's more divisive presence. Now, with Catherine ailing and Sophie stepping forward to support her, Camilla saw a dangerous narrative emerging, one in which she was becoming irrelevant. Whispers circulated that she had privately referred to Sophie as the other queen in waiting, a remark that, though unconfirmed, spread like wildfire among the staff. The idea that Sophie, the once overlooked countess, could be garnering the kind of trust and influence Camilla believed she had earned it was intolerable. Her frustration didn't end there. Charles's decision to allow Edward and Sophie to relocate to Windsor had reportedly ignited a fiery argument behind closed doors. Camilla felt blindsided, undermined, even betrayed. She had fought for decades to stand by Charles as his equal, not as an accessory. Now Edward, a brother Charles once dismissed as unremarkable, was being granted unprecedented access and influence during one of the monarchy's most fragile moments. And Sophie? She wasn't just offering comfort to Catherine, she was reshaping the emotional center of the royal family. Camilla's response was swift and strategic. Staff were quietly reassigned. Advisors loyal to her were shuffled into new roles, ensuring her voice remained in key conversations. aides who had grown too close to Edward or Sophie found themselves mysteriously sidelined. Every move was calculated, every smile rehearsed. Behind the silk curtains of royal tradition, a power struggle had erupted. One not fought with declarations, but with positioning, alliances, and subtle dominance. And the tension reached its peak when Camilla allegedly confronted Edward in private, questioning his intentions, reminding him of hierarchy and warning him of overreach. Edward, characteristically composed, reportedly responded with one line: "The crown survives through service, not status." The message was clear: he was not backing down. Still, Camilla wasn't finished. Control, for her, was everything. And now, with the public narrative slipping from her grasp, she became obsessed with one goal: reclaiming her place at the heart of the succession story. Because in a monarchy governed as much by perception as by blood, whoever controls the story controls the legacy. As palace alliances fractured, public support shifted dramatically, especially when an emotional message from Catherine took the nation by storm. It was only a few handwritten lines, but it shook the kingdom. Released on the eve of a major charity gala she could no longer attend, Catherine's personal message brought the nation to tears and renewed the royal family's resolve. But buried between the graceful words was a coded message, one that revealed far more than the palace expected. The message came quietly, posted to the official royal website and shared with select media outlets. No press conference. No television appearance. Just Catherine's words, written in her own hand, elegant and restrained, yet trembling with emotion. She began by expressing regret at her absence from the gala, thanking those who continued supporting the causes close to her heart. But as the letter unfolded, it became clear that this was not simply an apology, it was a farewell of sorts, a spiritual reckoning. "There are moments," she wrote, "when one must surrender to time and healing, for the sake of those we love most." That one sentence was enough to silence a nation. She spoke of her children not as royal heirs, but as innocent lives watching a mother fade in and out of strength. She wrote of William with tenderness, calling him my rock and my light. And then she mentioned Sophie. 3 words that stunned the monarchy's internal hierarchy: my sister in strength. It wasn't just a tribute, it was an elevation, a public declaration of alliance. And for the first time, the public saw what had been brewing behind palace walls. Catherine was handing emotional authority to Sophie, not to Camilla, not to Charles, but to the woman who had stood beside her in silence and in service. The ripple effects were immediate. Royal watchers dissected every line of the letter. Phrases like legacy worth protecting and faith in steady hands were interpreted as subtle rebukes of the chaos surrounding Charles and Camilla's reign. Some analysts noted the conspicuous absence of any mention of the king or queen consort. Others believed the entire message was a carefully crafted statement not just about recovery, but succession. A declaration that if she were to fade from public life, the torch would pass not through ceremony, but through conviction. Catherine was drawing a line in ink, and she did it with grace. Public response was overwhelming. Social media lit up with hashtags of support. Newspapers ran front-page tributes. Crowds began to gather outside Windsor with flowers, messages, and portraits of the princess. But perhaps most striking was the surge in public affection for Sophie. Her name, once quietly respected, now echoed through headlines. She became the symbol of stability, compassion, and continuity. Polls showed a dramatic shift in public trust towards Sophie and Edward, and the monarchy found itself caught in a new emotional current, one it hadn't prepared for, but couldn't deny. The letter was more than an update, it was a reckoning. A moment where one woman's vulnerability became the nation's rallying cry. It wasn't polished. It wasn't political. It was deeply, disarmingly human. And in that humanity, Catherine reclaimed control of her own narrative. But as public love soared, another threat loomed, one that came not from within the palace walls, but from across the Atlantic. They didn't send flowers. They didn't issue a public message. As the royal family rallied around Catherine, Meghan and Harry's silence grew deafening. But was it grief, strategy, or calculated distance? And just how far would they go to protect their new empire from Windsor's shifting power? As messages of support flooded in from every corner of the Commonwealth, the void from Montecito became impossible to ignore. No official statement, no acknowledgement, Nothing. It was as if the crisis didn't exist. And yet, behind that silence, the machinery of Meghan and Harry's media world had begun to stir. Sources close to Hollywood insiders claimed Netflix executives were already watching the headlines with interest, sensing an opportunity to pivot. Catherine's condition and the emotional swell behind Sophie and Edward's rise presented the perfect storm, a narrative twist the Sussexes hadn't anticipated. And now, they were recalibrating. In Montecito, strategy had always come before sentiment. Meghan's PR team, known for its meticulous control of messaging, allegedly began preparing a new narrative. One that could acknowledge Catherine's struggle just enough to seem compassionate, but redirect the focus toward broader conversations of resilience, freedom, and reinvention. Meetings were reportedly held with American outlets, gauging how best to reframe Meghan's image amidst the surge of public affection for the woman she once stood beside in royal protocol. The goal was clear. Don't compete with Catherine's pain, but don't let it define the Sussex story either. But Harry, sources said, was conflicted. Deeply. His bond with Catherine had once been unbreakable. She had been more than a sister-in-law, she had been a friend, a confidante in the early years of his exile from royal expectations. And now, watching her suffer from afar, surrounded by family he no longer recognized as his own, something in him began to fracture. Insiders revealed late-night calls between Harry and close friends, torn between his loyalty to Meghan and a growing ache to reach out to his brother. But the scars ran deep. Too deep. And William, dealing with Catherine's deteriorating condition, had no energy left for reconciliation. Tensions reignited. Communication between the brothers, already strained, allegedly broke down entirely. The idea of Harry flying to the UK was floated, then immediately dismissed. The palace, wary of press frenzy, rejected any visit that could be interpreted as a media stunt. The fear of leaks escalated. Every conversation was guarded. Every exchange, if any, monitored. Trust, once hanging by a thread, now lay in tatters. Meanwhile, whispers began to swirl from Montecito, a new interview, a book sequel, or worse, an emotional tell-all that could use Catherine's crisis as an unspoken backdrop to elevate the Sussex journey of liberation. For the monarchy, this wasn't just a silence. It was a signal. A reminder that the family fracture had become permanent, and that any return was now more fantasy than possibility. Meghan and Harry weren't simply absent, they were observing, calculating, waiting. But even amid global speculation and family fractures, the monarchy's focus narrowed to one question: what happens next? One recovering, one rising, one ready. In an unexpected twist of fate, Catherine, Sophie, and Edward now represent the monarchy's emotional and strategic axis. As Charles III's reign wanes and William prepares for the throne, this new royal triangle could be the crown's greatest strength or its final undoing. What began as a personal tragedy has evolved into a full-scale reshaping of the royal narrative. Catherine's recovery, once seen as a pause in public life, has become a crucible through which the nation is redefining what it expects from its monarchy. And by her side, not merely in symbolism but in function, stand Sophie and Edward. This is no longer about rank or seniority, it is about trust, relatability, and the emotional loyalty of a nation watching a family it once questioned begin to look startlingly human. Catherine, though still visibly frail, has become more powerful in her absence than most royals ever become on the global stage. Her letter to the nation, her silence through the storm, and now, whispers of a limited return to duty, each action, or lack thereof, has carried enormous weight. Public polls show an unprecedented surge in trust and admiration for the Princess of Wales. And not far behind her, Sophie and Edward have emerged not just as supporters, but as co-architects of a calmer, more compassionate royal era. Their presence at Windsor is no longer framed as temporary. Quiet conversations among palace insiders now point to Sophie's desire to make the residence permanent, a symbolic declaration that the emotional headquarters of the crown has shifted from Buckingham to the very heart of Windsor. Camilla's fading grip on influence is being measured not in scandal, but in silence. Plans are reportedly underway to streamline the monarchy further, fewer titles, fewer distractions. And with that streamlining comes a redirection. Less of Camilla's court, more of Catherine's cause. William, ever cautious, is said to be quietly preparing for a regency role. Charles's health remains a private matter, but the increasing number of duties shouldered by his eldest son tells a story the palace dares not say aloud. And at the center of it all is a triangle: Catherine's moral authority, Sophie's steady hand, and Edward's operational competence. Together, they form a version of the monarchy that feels less like spectacle and more like service. There's talk of Catherine returning to public life with one powerful engagement, a charity event tied directly to children's mental health, the cause she once championed and now embodies through her own resilience. It won't be a full return. It won't need to be. Because one moment, one appearance will say what no speech ever could. And when she does re-emerge, flanked by Sophie and supported by Edward, the message will be clear. This is not the monarchy of yesterday. This is the monarchy reforged by pain, by loyalty, and by the unlikeliest alliance of hearts. And so, the move into Windsor wasn't just a gesture of support, it was the first move in a quiet royal revolution. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.